I'm sitting by my apartment window, the city lights spilling across the glass, swirling like a million tiny promises I almost didn't believe I could have. My silk blouse brushes my arm as I lift my coffee, the warmth seeping into my fingers, grounding me in this moment. I'm calm, composed, polished on the outside, but inside, well, let's just say certain truths are still tucked neatly away. Then my phone buzzes, cutting through the hum of downtown traffic below. I glance at the screen and feel that familiar flutter, the one I haven't let hit me in years. It's a group chat from my family. I shouldn't open it, I know that, but curiosity wins. One message stands out. We've been thinking about Sedona again. Maybe it's time she heals fully. I freeze, my throat tight. Sedona, my sister. And the memory hits me, the $62,000 ring my parents sold to fund her so-called healing retreat. I remember the glint of it on my finger, the way it caught the sunlight, how I had promised myself I'd never let anyone take that away. And yet, they did, with all the ease in the world, leaving me to swallow my pride and my pain in one bitter bite. I set the phone down, fingers drumming lightly against the ceramic mug. I've spent years building my life quietly, shaping it into something unshakable. I've grown, I've thrived, and I've done it all without them knowing the full extent. But now, the past is knocking at my door. And I realize with a small, almost mischievous smile, that it's my turn to decide what happens next. I was 17 the last time I felt truly invisible in my own family. That morning started like any other, sunlight spilling over the white lace curtains, the faint smell of my mother's cinnamon coffee drifting through the house, but I already knew something was off. My parents called me into the living room with that strange mix of urgency and forced calm that always made my stomach knot. "You need to understand, sweetie," my mother said, her voice soft but firm. "We sold the ring." I blinked. My chest tightened. My $62,000 ring, the one my father had gifted me for graduation, the one that symbolized every ounce of effort I'd put into my grades, my ambitions, my dreams, was gone. Sold. Just like that. For Sedona, my father added, his eyes darting away from mine. "She needs to heal. It's important." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that didn't reach my eyes. "You mean she needs a vacation on my dime?" My hands shook. I wanted to grab the ring from their hands, to demand justice, but it was already gone. The lump in my throat grew bigger, heavier, and I could feel tears I refused to shed pricking at the corners of my eyes. I had never felt so small, dismissed, utterly replaceable. That evening, I went to my grandmother. She didn't need to ask what happened. She simply pulled me into her arms, her scent of lavender and old books wrapping around me like a shield. "They don't get to define your worth," she whispered. "It's not theirs to give or take. You're stronger than you know, and someday you'll show them what they couldn't see." Her words lingered, a soft echo in the chaos of my heartbreak. She pressed a small, worn notebook into my hands, a journal filled with quotes and advice she'd collected over decades. "This is yours now. Let it guide you." I held it tightly that night, the leather warm against my fingers, and made a silent promise. I wouldn't just survive. I wouldn't just stand tall. I would leave, carve my own path, and build a life they couldn't touch, couldn't imagine, and most importantly, couldn't ignore. And in that quiet, determined moment, the first sparks of independence ignited, a fire that would one day turn into something unshakable. Leaving home felt like stepping into a world that had no rules, or maybe it was that I finally got to write my own. My grandmother's journal was tucked under my arm like a talisman, each word a quiet push, reminding me that my worth wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. I rented a small studio apartment in the city, walls bare except for a single framed quote, "Your value isn't defined by those who fail to see it." It became my mantra, my daily armor. I found work in a boutique marketing firm, the kind that thrived on creativity but demanded every ounce of energy I had. The mentor I met there, Clara, a seasoned woman with streaks of silver in her hair and a laugh that could disarm the most critical client, saw something in me I hadn't yet claimed for myself. "You've got fire," she said on my first day. Don't let anyone tell you how bright it can shine. The nights were long. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, eyes stinging from exhaustion, heart thrumming with both doubt and determination. I made mistakes, embarrassing ones, but each one became a lesson I refused to forget. I studied, I asked questions, I stayed late when others left. Slowly, the clients came. First, a small local business that trusted me with their fledgling campaign. Then a bigger project that paid enough to make me pause, heart pounding, realizing for the first time that I was truly earning my independence. I kept my success quiet from my family. A modest post here, a generic photo there. No need for them to see me thriving while they had once dismissed me. I learned the subtle art of accomplishment without applause from those who never deserved it. Each paycheck, each new opportunity, each client's praise was a brick in the foundation of a life I was quietly building for myself. And then came the first real win, a major account, one that could define my career. I remember sitting in the dim glow of my apartment, the city lights flickering like stars outside, and feeling a surge of pride I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I whispered to myself, "This is mine. All mine. And they don't even know it yet." Evenings often found me curled up with Clara, coffee in hand, trading strategies and laughter, slowly shedding the self-doubt that had clung to me like a second skin. With every small victory, every earned client, every step forward, I felt the sting of the past, the lost ring, the betrayal, the dismissal, fade into a distant memory, replaced by the thrilling, empowering pulse of my own success. By the time I reached 30, I had built something remarkable, an agency thriving under my guidance, a network of clients who trusted me implicitly, and a financial independence that made the memory of that $62,000 ring feel less like a loss and more like a catalyst. I had created a life my parents couldn't have imagined, a life they couldn't touch. And I knew, deep down, that one day they would see it. Not because I needed them to, but because it was time the world, including them, witnessed what I had quietly built from the ashes of their choices. The invitation was casual. "Come by the office if you're in town," my mother had texted, as if it were nothing more than a coffee chat. I knew better. She and my father had been under the impression that I was still struggling, that I had quietly settled into some modest life, maybe a small apartment, maybe a job that barely paid. The look on their faces when they walked through the door would be priceless. I waited in my office, the space I had meticulously designed over the years. Expensive art adorned the walls, pieces I had chosen because they spoke to me, not because anyone else would approve. The sunlight from the floor-to-ceiling windows highlighted the gleam of my custom desk, the neat stacks of client portfolios, the small personal touches that made the office unmistakably mine. A framed photo of my grandmother smiling, her journal on a shelf, the scent of fresh lilies lingering in a vase. Every detail was deliberate, a silent statement of the life I had built. The door opened, and there they were. My mother, in her usual pastel blazer, looking slightly off balance. My father, suit slightly rumpled, trying to mask the tension behind his forced smile. And, of course, my sister, bright-eyed, unsuspecting, probably expecting the same shy, struggling girl they had imagined me to be. "Hi," I said, smiling warmly, standing behind my desk. My voice was calm, steady, with just enough warmth to disarm. "I'm glad you could make it." They stepped in, taking in the surroundings, and I watched carefully as the realization began to dawn. My mother's lips parted slightly. My father's hand twitched toward his briefcase, almost forgetting to keep his composure. My sister's eyes widened, the carefree aura replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. "I wanted to show you something," I continued, gesturing to the digital display on my desk. A detailed portfolio of my agency's achievements flickered to life: contracts, client campaigns, revenue graphs, awards. "This," I said softly, letting the weight of the word settle, "is what I've built over the past 10 years. From scratch. No help. No shortcuts." My father swallowed hard. This is incredible," he stammered. I leaned forward, letting the silence stretch. "And in case you were wondering," I said, keeping my tone smooth, I also manage our firm's assets and own 60% of the company. The $62,000 ring you sold for Sedona? It's long since replaced, several times over. And while I appreciate your concern for my sister's healing, I think it's time the world saw the real me. Shock rippled across their faces. My sister opened her mouth, then closed it again, realizing perhaps for the first time that her privileges had been built on assumptions, not merit. My mother's eyes filled, not with tears of joy, but with the uncomfortable sting of having underestimated me for years. My father's jaw tightened, a subtle acknowledgement that his choices had consequences he had never imagined. I let them absorb it. Each second stretched, heavy with disbelief, awe, and perhaps a touch of shame. Then I smiled, leaning back, sipping my coffee as if it were just another morning. The quiet confidence in my posture said more than any words. I was no longer the girl they thought they could dismiss. I was someone who had transformed hurt into power, betrayal into achievement. And in that silence, I realized the sweet satisfaction of control, the quiet turning of tables, was far more powerful than any confrontation could have been. The air in the office was thick with unspoken tension. They had seen my success, witnessed the life I'd built, and I held all the cards now. But power without purpose felt hollow, and I had no intention of simply gloating. This was my moment to set boundaries, to turn the tables not with anger, but with clarity and grace. I want to be clear, I began, letting each word land deliberately. I can help, but it's going to be on my terms. My mother flinched, my father straightened, and my sister's gaze darted nervously between us. I continued, keeping my tone firm yet compassionate. No more half measures. No more excuses. If anyone is going to lean on me, you need to prove you can stand on your own feet first. I turned to my sister first. Sedona was a privilege, not a solution. Healing comes from effort, from facing your own challenges, not escaping them. I'll help you, but only if you commit to real growth. Therapy, self-discipline, and accountability. No shortcuts. Her cheeks flushed, a mix of shame and understanding. I could see the first flicker of self-awareness, the moment she realized the world doesn't hand you healing because it's convenient. Then I faced my parents. You too underestimated me. You prioritized comfort over fairness, assumptions over insight. If you want a relationship with me that's anything more than superficial, you need to change how you approach your choices. Support me without interference. Respect my boundaries. And for once, acknowledge my achievements without comparison to anyone else. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, but I saw the nod in her eyes, the recognition that nothing would stay the same. My father's hands fidgeted with his cufflinks, betraying the silent reckoning taking place behind his composed exterior. I care about each of you, I added, softer now, letting warmth seep through the firmness. But I won't compromise my progress or my peace. I've earned my independence through effort, resilience, and tenacity. You can't take that away, and you won't. I leaned back, letting them process. I could see it, small shifts already beginning. My sister straightened, determination sparking in her eyes. My mother's shoulders eased, a reluctant acknowledgement that perhaps pride could evolve into support. My father's jaw relaxed, just slightly, as if accepting that he could no longer be the architect of my decisions. Power was not in punishment. It was in setting terms, in creating an environment where growth was demanded and respect was mandatory. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and undervalued for too long. Now the tables had turned. And I was not just asking for change, I was guiding it. The symbolic journal from my grandmother, tucked into my desk drawer, whispered its silent reminder. Strength isn't just in what you achieve, but in how you demand fairness and integrity from those around you. And in that quiet office, with the city humming below, I felt the full weight of control, not vengeance, not superiority, but the deliberate, quiet satisfaction of shaping the future on my own terms. Weeks passed, and I watched the changes unfold, not in grand gestures, but in small, meaningful ways. My sister began attending therapy sessions diligently, journaling her thoughts, and taking real steps toward accountability. I noticed her confidence grow, her laughter more genuine, less dependent on external validation. My parents, too, were shifting. My mother stopped comparing achievements and instead asked for advice on her own projects. My father began mentoring younger colleagues at his firm, focusing on giving rather than controlling. They were learning to see me, not as a reflection of their decisions, but as an individual who had forged her own path. One evening, I sat in my office, the city lights casting long shadows across my desk. The leather journal from my grandmother rested open in front of me. I traced her handwriting with my fingertips, remembering the first time she pressed it into my hands. They don't get to define your worth. Show them who you truly are. I smiled, realizing how far I had come. The pain, the betrayal, the sleepless nights, they were all threads in the tapestry of the woman I had become. Strong, resilient, independent, but also compassionate, capable of extending guidance and grace without sacrificing my boundaries. The $62,000 ring had been sold, yes, but it no longer mattered. What mattered was the life I had built in its place, a life that couldn't be taken or diminished. I had turned hurt into fuel, betrayal into clarity, and dismissal into determination. I glanced out the window, watching the skyline shimmer like a promise. I had learned that real power isn't about revenge. It's about self-respect, vision, and the courage to demand fairness while offering growth. And in that quiet, reflective moment, I whispered to myself, softly but firmly, I am enough. I always was, and now the world knows it too. It was a final, private acknowledgement of the journey I had survived and the woman I had become. The relationships that mattered were stronger, built on authenticity and mutual respect. The past no longer held power over me, and for the first time in years, I felt truly free.